Most people think that you need a college education to start a business. They're wrong, but what they're right about is there are some industries that it's imperative, probably critical, to have a college education. That being the medical industry, possibly obviously the legal industry. Very possible that you have to have a college education. But for a tremendous amount of businesses out there, you just don't have to have a college education. Now, I did get a college education, and I'm in a really great position because I had the ability to communicate to you what I think was important about my college education and what wasn't. Because the particular company that I started was in an industry that I just didn't need to have a college education. So looking back on my college education, I realized that I didn't have to have a lot of what was at college. And here's why. A lot of the education that I got at college was not related to business. And really, it was nice, I mean, it was interesting, but it really didn't help me in my business. And I also think that at college, there's a tremendous amount of distractions. Obviously, some of the classes that you take are distracting. And then there's a lot of social things that go on at college that are just distracting and can kind of slow you down. So all in all, these are the things that I think are important about college. And I think you can get some classes. I think you should take some classes from college if you're going to start a business, college level type classes anyway. And these are the ones that I think that you need to focus on. First of all, most important, I think, is focusing on accounting, making sure that you get college level education on accounting. And here's why. Understanding the numbers of your company are critical. Now, you don't have to become a CPA. I'm not saying that. But at my company, my second most important employee in the company was my CFO, because the CFO in the financial end of the company was not only making sure that we had enough cash and generating cash for the company, but they were accounting for the performance of our company and making sure that we didn't go broke. So accounting level, college level classes in accounting are important. Now, as I go through all this list, there's no real order, okay? So I'm just going to start listing off all the things that are important for you to have for your education. Second thing, college level education classes that I think you need is marketing classes. Yeah, I think you should. It kind of depends on the college. So try to do your research there and make sure that whoever's teaching those marketing classes has a good experience level concerning marketing. But college level marketing is important. I did talk about accounting, kind of a sister subject to study in college or college level would be finance. Understanding stocks, understanding portfolio analysis, understanding financing, to start your business. All those classes are important to understand and to know. I also think statistics, forgive me, I get a little tongue-tied when I say it, but taking statistics classes are very valuable because they help you understand when you're testing and doing research out there, marketing research, perhaps things within your company. I think it's important to understand standard deviation and sample size and all the things that they teach you in statistics. So those classes were very valuable for me. So after but once again, there's no order to this, but classes, college level classes are important in your education, for getting your education prior to starting your company. Next, I think it's important to study Al Ries, R-I-E-S, and his daughter, Laura Ries. And they've written a tremendous amount of books on marketing. And I just strongly believe in reading a tremendous amount of marketing books out there and studying a lot of different marketing concepts. I found that for my particular company, and one of the big reasons I was able to become as wealthy as I was because of the concepts that I learned from Al Ries and his daughter. They're brilliant. Al Ries is no longer alive, but he is probably going to go down as one of the most brilliant marketing minds that the U.S. has ever produced. And for me, it was critical to learn the concept of focus, the concept of positioning. And he's written a lot of books. You need to read every single one of the books that he's written. Now, he has some videos on YouTube, and I believe you'll find some videos out there from Laura Ries. But study those books backwards, forwards. For me, I read them multiple times, especially the Focus book and the Origin of Brands book. Two other individuals I think it's important for you to study and get education on. There are two economists, Thomas Sowell, S-O-W-E-L-L, and Milton Friedman, F-R-I-E-D-M-A-N. Both of these economists are well known. And the reason I think it's important for you to get an education from these particular individuals is it's going to really help you understand capitalism and the free market system, free enterprise. And I think it's important that you understand capitalism and believe in capitalism in the bones of your body, because I think it helps you in your career, your journey of building your business, to make you understand just how important you are and how important your business is in helping mankind. And that's the way I feel about capitalism. And I think these two individuals will help you believe in capitalism, help you understand how important that whatever you're doing with your business, that you are helping mankind. And there's a lot of industries out there, a lot of people out there that are preaching against business and think that it's not good for mankind and good for the earth. And I just disagree with that strongly. And I think these two individuals, Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, by studying them, reading their books, it's going to really help you. There are other books that I think are important for you to read and study, and I did. I've got literally hundreds of autobiographies and biographies of founders of companies. I'll list three. I think it's important to study Steve Jobs at Apple and understand the journey that he went through. I think it's important to study Sam Walton at Walmart and Phil Knight at Nike. But really just, any biography that you can find out there, and I've got hundreds in my libraries, but read those founders' history and their biographies to understand the things that they went through. Now, I think as you're building your business, you'll relate to a lot of those things, or at least if you read those ahead of time, when you're building your business, maybe some of those concepts and some of those experiences that they had will come up in your mind. So read those biographies, autobiographies, and that'll build your education before starting your business. There's another thing that I think is important, and that's to watch this series that's on television for the most part. You might be able to find it, some old archived history of them, but you need to watch all the Shark Tank episodes. Now, that's a lot. You may not be able to get through them all, but I found that Shark Tank helped me. Now Shark Tank wasn't around when I first started my business, but Shark Tank kind of came somewhere in the middle part of building my business. I started in 1986. But I found that Shark Tank was just a tremendous help, Now, for me, after I'd already started my business, I related to the stories that were happening on Shark Tank. And those of you that don't know what Shark Tank is, it's basically, people that are wanting to start businesses or are running businesses are coming to a group of investors, and this is all, videoed. It's an episode, and these investors are listening to their pitch and deciding whether they're going to invest in these companies that come on Shark Tank. And I really related to those investors a tremendous amount. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for them, and I admire them because I agree with the questions and the things and a lot of the decisions that they made. And what you're going to find is that these investors, for the most part, they're concerned about three big things. That, at least this is what I felt. And that is, one, are they focused? Are they doing other things, or are they just focused on this business and not distracted by, maybe a job or some other companies? Another thing that they key in on is their numbers. Do they know their numbers? Now, I talked about this earlier, right? About how important it is that I found to know your numbers, know your financial numbers. And these investors on Shark Tank, they're very concerned about that. How well you obviously know your financial statements, including balance sheet and income statement, be able to budget, know your sales numbers, of course, and know what's called KPIs, key performance indicators, that you kind of create, and it's very, very important to those investors that those potential companies that they're going to invest in, these entrepreneurs, that they understand their numbers. And then finally, and this is the one I really relate to the most, is doesn't matter how great these entrepreneurs are intelligent wise. They might have a high IQ. They might have a lot of hard work. They might be very friendly and nice and motivated and all those great things. But if they don't have sales, it really affects those investors. And I get that, because I've seen that over and over again. I've seen where there were a lot of people a lot more intelligent than me, had more money than me, had a lot more traits that I didn't have, that you would think would be great for business. But I'm telling you right now, if you can't sell, if you can't create a product or a service that can be sold, and if you can't create sales, and that's the bottom line, if you can't generate sales, then you can't be an entrepreneur. And that's something that you'll learn by watching those Shark Tank episodes. So watch as many of those as you can. Another thing I think is really important, vitally important to do prior to starting your company. And once again, there's no particular order of the things that I'm saying to build your education. But I think it is vital to have a job in sales, a commission job in sales, sometime before you start your company. And it probably needs to be at least a year. And what's that going to teach you? Well, hopefully you're going to learn with this sales job, you're going to learn that originating sales, getting leads, is a difficult and hard thing to do. And you're going to learn about closing, right? You should learn about closing, how to close that sale. If someone's coming in or someone's inquiring about buying, from whatever you're selling. But then there's another thing that you're going to learn. And I learned this prior to starting my company. You should learn this. You should learn that building a relationship with those potential customers, and then after they become customers, continuing that relationship and making sure that your company and your products come through for that customer. If you do that well, then those customers are going to generate a tremendous amount of repeat business for you, word of mouth. And understanding that concept can only be learned by working in sales. So I think it's critical to have some type of sales job before you start your company. Another job that I think is critical to have before you start your company is some type of a management job. Now, you've noticed I've said I've not really stressed going out there and learning management skills, by reading or watching videos. And, do that. That's fine. And you're going to learn, some management thoughts and techniques and strategies when you read your biographies of all those founders. But there's nothing going to teach you more about the importance of employees until you get a management job. So I think it's critical to get some type of a management job before you start your company. And it could be an assistant manager at a fast food restaurant. It could be assistant manager at a hardware store. I don't care. Figure out a way somewhere, whether maybe you're at college, maybe you're trying to build before college, but get you a job in management. And if it can be both sales and management, well, great. But you need to have the understanding, the knowledge of managing people. And this is what you need to take away from that. You need to have a really good understanding of how important employees are to whatever company that you're going to start. And I don't think there's anything that can teach you better than experiencing, managing employees. Ideally, you're hiring and firing some employees, and having to correct some employees, and maybe making some mistakes with employees. That's going to be vital. It happened with me. I was assistant manager at a grocery store and assistant manager at a Popeyes chicken prior to starting my company. Very valuable. I made a tremendous amount of mistakes at those companies. Sorry for them. But those mistakes helped me in starting my company. Now, finally, and this really is the final lesson, is you have to get education, I believe, on an industry that you want to work in and start your business. Now, a lot of people will say to find an industry that you love, and you work at some place you love, and you're never really working. You never really have a job. So I get that. I understand that, but I found, and this happened with me, I didn't necessarily work in the industry that I loved, but I came to love it. I fell in love with it later on, and I worked in the sign industry, like the signs you see out in front of businesses or graphics that you see on windows and vehicles. I worked in that industry. And I came to love that industry because I made money in that industry, and I found that I was pretty good at it. So I think there's some things you need to think about when you're picking this industry. You're going to have to find an industry that ideally is growing and that you have the ability to generate some capital to be able to start a business in. And obviously you're going to have to learn this industry. So probably a great way to learn the industry is to work in that industry, right? So once you've worked in that industry, or you are working in that industry, what you're going to do in this industry is you're going to try to find the weaknesses in the industry. And that goes with, learning about not only the competitors, and maybe working at one of these companies, but learning about the vendors, obviously learning about the customers, and finding a weakness out there that you think that you can build a company on to attack that weakness. And some people call it a difference. That's fine. But you're basically building a company that is going to allow you to be a little different and focus on that particular weakness and difference to build that company. So, what if you don't do that? What if you don't get industry experience? So, is that possible? Yeah, I think that there's people out there that maybe have really rich parents, or maybe they can go generate a tremendous amount of capital for some reason to be able to back them in starting a company in an industry. And if you haven't worked in that industry and you don't know much about that industry, then I'm not going to say it's not possible to do that. I just think it's going to cost you a whole hell of a lot more money, you know? And the problem with learning on the job is, you know, you might piss off a tremendous amount of customers and lose a tremendous amount of customers. And that's going to be difficult to get those customers back. So my gut feeling is that, and I didn't do this, I worked in an industry first and found the weakness that I wanted to attack in the company that I wanted to build. And of course, I also found, you know, investors, you know, by working in that industry. I found, you know, banks. I found vendors. You know, I built relationships with a lot of people while I was working in that industry, and that really, really helped me. So if you don't do that, then you're going to spend a tremendous amount of money learning on the job to, you know, to start a company and build a company. Now you could buy a franchise, right? And you could do that, and the franchise organization is going to help you learn on the job, and they're going to be able to teach you. That's another thing you can do. Of course, that's going to cost you probably, you know, more money to do that, but that's another way to do that, right? So if you don't get education, and I'm a strong believer in getting this education. I got most of this education. Some of it I didn't do. You know, I did get a college education and made some mistakes there. And now that I know what I know, I would have done things differently. And I would have read a lot more different books. And of course, I would have read Reese's books quicker and faster. So there's some things that I wished I would have done before I started my business. But if you don't get education, my feeling is you're going to have to get lucky. And I think that's a problem, because for me, the whole purpose of starting a business is to reduce the amount of luck, right? Otherwise, why not just, you know, go gamble all the time? So I think building a business is about increasing the odds of success, reducing, you know, the odds of failure, reducing the luck that's needed. So get that education. And it helped me build over $100 million in net worth by selling my company for over $100 million.